In 1860, David Wyrick, he's a guy who surveyed the Newark earthworks. He was digging into a mound near those earthworks and he found a wooden coffin made of oak. They opened up the coffin and found a skeleton of a man holding a little box that was about 8.10 inches in size. The box had been cemented shut here. This, by the way, is sitting in Ohio. Well, he opened up the box and he found a little man inside, a little black stone. They took it to scholars and they looked at it. The man seems to be carrying something, and there's writing here at first they couldn't recognize. The writing is, they thought in 1860, some sort of Hebrew. Well, finally, about 20 years later, they found some rabbis living in the area, and the rabbis looked at that and they could read it. They said it was an old kind of block Hebrew, and it was a rendition of the Ten Commandments. Now, this is another piece. Block Hebrew, they said they'd never seen anything like it. Mainstream archaeologists at the time called this a hoax. But then in 1900, or just about after 1900, in Israel, they found the same block-style Hebrew writing. Mainstream archaeologists still dismissed the findings. They found it in Israel and they found it in Ohio. But there was another stone that they found that they couldn't argue. This is the Bat Creek stone. It was found during the course of an official Smithsonian evacuation. The Smithsonian didn't understand the meaning of the writing on the stone. They thought it was Cherokee, since it came from Cherokee country. They didn't realize that it's actually Hebrew. They had published this originally upside down. They threw it in a box at the bottom of the Smithsonian, put it in the basement. Many years later, a scholar took it out of the box, looked at it, and went, oh my gosh, it's upside down. It's Phoenician, ancient Hebrew. So what's going on here? What is that about? Where is that history?
Far away in the distant lands along the east coast of North America lies the territory of the Black Indians. That is, the Pequot Indians.
Peace and blessings, peace and blessings. Hopefully everyone's doing tube or everyone's doing well. Shalom, shalom to everyone that's in the chat. Shalom, shalom to everyone that is watching the video. Big shout out to our moderators, Sis Ema Saw and Cassandra. Much love, much love. Shalom, shalom, shalom. Hopefully everybody's doing good. Always appreciative. And hey, family, if we could please, let's just do a quick audio check just before we get started. If my audio sounds okay, if we could just do a one, just put a one in the chat, please, Mr. Ka, family, if the audio sounds okay. And thank you. I see ones in the chat. Thank you, Ema Saul. Thank you, family. All right, well, let's go ahead and get started. Well, family, well, it is that time of the year. And I'm sure some of you all may be getting invited to Thanksgiving, hang out with family and friends, and, you know, unfortunately or fortunately, you know, this is usually the time of year when I try to bring this information out just to kind of share some additional information as far as the, you know, the origins of Thanksgiving, the, you know, the bloody origins of Thanksgiving. And in this particular case, I'm going to highlight, most high willing, we're going to highlight the Israelite association with the Pequot and the Indians in America. Hallelujah. All right. And with that being said, actually, let me just switch over to the good old PowerPoint slide here. And, you know, most are willing, what we'll do, family, in the next, you know, the next few series, I do want to finish up the 1619 series. And I think there's another series I want to finish up, but they all fall underneath this new, you know, this umbrella, which I call Black America, right? There's this one truth that the prevailing truth that when you start to look at old books, and of course, when I say old books, I'm referring to books that were published, you know, either around 1850 or before. So 1850 or older, those old books have a totally different history. Well, what are you talking about, Brother Benaiah? Well, first of all, when it talks about the Spanish and Portuguese brews, as you all know, you know, we've proven time and again that the prevailing thought using old books was that the Israelites were dark-skinned, melanated people. Likewise, when you use the old books and you look at the history of America or North America, likewise, you will also find the same pattern, family. And this is one of the things that we haven't really touched on yet, but that is the next, it's the next evolution of what we're talking about. You know, first we were talking about Israel going into captivity over in Africa, getting on the slave ships, coming over to the Americas. Well, now we're turning the page, we're turning the chapter, and now we're getting ready to talk about Israel here in America. And so to that end, we're going to use the same principle, we're going to use the same methodology, and that is we're going to use old books published at around 1850 or older to redefine history. And I challenge you, family, that you have to, at this point, family, you got to throw everything out. Like everything that we've learned as far as history, we got to throw it out. We have to be willing to relearn it using these old resources or references. You know, why? And maybe you're asking, well, why are the old books different from the new books? Well, and that's one of the things that we looked at as well. Because if you notice, family, when a lot of, you know, so-called Black folks were in slavery, it was illegal to read those books. It was illegal to read those books in the 1800s. It was illegal to read those books that were older than the 1850s. In fact, the punishment was so severe that some of our forefathers were unalived because they were simply reading those old books. In some cases, they even had their thumbs cut off so that they could not turn pages because they were reading those old books. And so you have to ask yourself, well, what was in those old books that they did not want us or our forefathers to see? Well, what we're going to do, family, we're going to take a look at a few of those old books, just a handful in this video presentation. But the truth is in those old books, family. And it wasn't until, you know, we'll just say that someone took over the printing press in the late 1850s, early 1900s, that we then started getting a new narrative spun, right? A new doctrine, a new history that was pushed forward where there was a lot of whitewashing and a lot of the original history was covered over, right? And so praise be to the Most High. You know, I believe he's bringing these, you know, this truth back out. And this is just part of that rediscovery. All right. Hallelujah. All right, well, say all that to say, of course, we know about the 13 colonies. What you may not know, family, is that during the 1600s, there was only 12 colonies, like the 12 tribes of Israel. And you can see on the screen there that Georgia wasn't founded until 1732, when that was the 13th colony. But for the good part of the 1600s, at least around 1682 was when Pennsylvania was joined the fold. But you'll see that there was 12 colonies initially in the 1600s. And then, all right, so since we're talking about Thanksgiving, right? And of course, that we know the if you ever watched the Charlie Brown Thanksgiving, it's fun. It's kind of funny. Well, it's funny, but it's not, right? Because you watch. I know I was growing up watching the Charlie Brown's Thanksgiving special. That was one of my favorite, cartoons that was out there to watch at around this time of year. And when you watched it, everyone was having a good time. Everyone was eating and breaking bread. However, if we were to get into a time machine and go back to that time period, it would be vastly different. One thing that we would notice right off the bat, once we stepped off the time machine, being a person of color, well, hey, people of color weren't free at that time. So if you stepped out of the time machine, they may try to put some cuffs on you or those iron shackles around your neck and try to put you to work in the field. And then the second thing that you would notice is that there were a lot more colored people around than modern day history would admit today. Like a lot of the people that we would call the forefathers of America. And this is the thing that we're going to challenge you with here in the near future, family. But a lot of the forefathers, the people that were there at the beginning, they were people of color, according to the old books. Hallelujah. According to the old books. And shout out to brother Eric Tinsley. Thank you for your super chat. Much appreciated. Hallelujah. All right. And so to that end, family, just to kind of reprogram your paradigm, or let's do a quick paradigm shift here with the Indians. So with that, let's start with the Pequots. So we're starting with the Pequots, and what we're going to read here is the association of the Pequots with the Israelites. I'll say it again: the Pequots with the Israelites. So you see on the screen, this references the Indians, the 10 lost tribes, and this was published, says William Apis, and it's 1831, and I may be mispronouncing that name, but I'm sure you can see it there on your screen. But William Apes, right? And it says 1798 to 1839, and it says a Pequot. So this is a Pequot defining a Pequot, right? He's putting us on game, right? He's giving us his own history. So William Apes, 1798 to 1839, a Pequot, was a Methodist minister and one of the most prominent Indian public intellectuals of his time. So this isn't just some random dude, right? This isn't just somebody that's just writing just to write. This is, according to this, it says he's a prominent Indian public intellectual of his time. So let's hear what he has to say. He says he was also a tireless activist for Indian rights. On a number of occasions, as in the short talk printed here, he propounded the belief that the indigenous peoples of Americas were the 10 lost tribes. Here we go. This is a Pequot Indian, right? And this is the Pequots that are tied to Thanksgiving, the Thanksgiving massacre that occurred. He's over here saying that the Indians are associated with the 10 lost tribes. So we have to put Thanksgiving into perspective, that Thanksgiving is now not just a massacre of Indians. Well, now the Pequot massacre or Thanksgiving is now a massacre of the 10 lost tribes. Somebody's in trouble. Well, let's keep reading. It says with sharp irony, he said that he had studied the issue and concluded that the theory was true. Apis turned the rhetoric of Christianity against whites to ask how if Indians were the lost tribes, there was any possible reason for discrimination against them. You see how he turned that around? And he said, and also, family, you can kind of learn something on our way to learning something here. Notice that he's pointing out the whites, right? It says Christianity against whites. So that just goes to show that he's not counting himself among the whites. And in fact, if you look at pictures of the Pequots today, and actually I forgot to put this in there, but if you look at the pictures of the descendants of the Pequots today, they are still a dark melanated people. You know, I'll say that maybe they're a little bit lighter than the average black, but they're still a melanated people today. So just to kind of show that everything's still lining up. Where it says, apes turn rhetoric of Christianity against whites to ask how, if Indians were the 10 lost tribes, there was any possible reason for discrimination against them. On another occasion, he went even further, saying that as he understood it, Jesus was a Middle Eastern Jew. That being the case, whose skin color was closer to his than that of whites, or Epps' own. Let's see. That being the case, whose skin color was closer to his, that of whites or apes' own. Well, listen to that, family. Let's keep going. And this is from, let me back up here. It says, understood. Okay, gotcha. All right, so here we got this one. It says, America, being an accurate description of the New World. So we have read this reference before. Now, this was one of the references that we read, and this book was published back in the 1600s. And when we read this book, this was the book that dropped the, it actually exposed a big chunk of our history as far as like the descendants of the Jews of Spain and Portugal. And it showed that they were placed on the west coast of Africa and sent into slavery. And that's on page, I believe it's like 554. I'm sorry, 574 in this book. 574 of this book shows that the Jews in large numbers were placed on the west coast of Africa and then sent into slavery. And this is by John Ogilvy, right? Book written in the 1600s. Again, this is one of those undeniable truths that not only is it here, but we can also find it in other works. But the thing I want to show you here is that also in this book also talks about the 10 lost tribes of Israel. And here it says, some would derive the Americans from the Jews. It says others from the 10 tribes of Israel carried into captivity. It says the ground of which opinion is that the Jews and Israelites were scattered amongst all nations. Therefore, they concluded that America was also peopled by them. The rather because the ancient Jews and Americans were of one complexion, It says, and went alike habited, both going without shoes, only wearing sandals, and an upper coat over a shortened linen vest. It says an upper coat over a shortened linen vest. It says both are humble, quick of apprehension, obliging, that was it says, yet valiant. It says, but it is certain they cannot be like the Jews. And this is, he's casting doubt here. It says, but it is certain they cannot be like the Jews because the Americans change their habits according as they live in cold or hot countries and going not in the least like one or another. So he's saying America as a whole, like, all those different tribes, it says America, they change their habits. So these guys aren't like the Jews because the Jews maintain their habit. So he's not necessarily agreeing with the narrative that's out there. And just to show you here's a picture of, from that same book. And you can see, these, and I'm using air quotes, Indians have that long coat that was described in that previous picture, right? Long coat over a short vest. And also notice that they have the mitri as well. All right. Well, let's keep going, family. So this is another reference. This is the Jews in America, It says, or the probabilities. And this is yet another book that was written before the 1850s. And for this one, let's start with, we're going to start here and read the highlighted area. And just to give you some background here. So in this one, he's basically recounting some information that he heard about the Jews being over in America. And so in this, he's retelling of a story where a person actually came from America over to a place near the Holy Land where he's checking in just to see the state of the Holy Land, to see, who's still there, what happened, and to give a report of the people that he just left. Like, he's part of the 10 lost tribes, and he's coming back from America back over to the Holy Land, and he's giving a report of what's going on back in the Holy Land, in addition to trying to figure out what's going on in the Holy Land. And it says, the other was that a messenger, this is the one I'm talking about, he's referred to as the messenger. It says that a messenger was come unto the Jews who reside near about the Holy Land. So he's coming to the Jews that reside near about the Holy Lands. He says, from the 10 tribes to take inquiry concerning the state of the land and what was become of the 2 tribes and a half which was left. So 2 tribes, Judah and Benjamin and Levi, right? Which was there. And it says, where else is become the 2 tribes that was left. It says, when they were transported from thence by Salmanassar, I believe that's during the time of the Assyrians. It says, this messenger was described to be a grave man having some attendants in good equipage about him. He told them that the people from which he was sent were the tribes of Israel. Let me read that again. It says, he told them that the people from which he was sent were the tribes of Israel. So he's claiming to be, he's of the tribes of Israel, and this is where he's coming from. And he's coming to give a report. He says, which in the days of Hosea, the king, were carried captive out of their own land. Excuse me. As it's out of their own land by the king of Assyria, who transported them from, it says, Samaria into Africa and the cities of the Medes. Remember, the Medes are Iran today, the cities of the Medes. So even today, family, when we're talking about Iran, according to the history of the 10 tribes, they were brought over into Iran, right? And it says, and he's going to say that they didn't stay there. This is what happened. It says, but they being grieved for the transgression which caused God to be angry with them, they took resolution to separate themselves from all idolaters. And we'll get that next page here in a moment. But I just want to show you here, family, that what he's echoing, like the history that he's retelling, matches up almost word for word, line for line in 2nd Esdras. This is in the Apocrypha. 2nd Esdras, verse 13 and verse 40, and you can probably go through verse 50. But same thing, family, where it says, these lost tribes of Israel were taken away into captivity to the time of the king Hosea. King Shalmaneser of Assyria captured them and deported them to a foreign land east of the Euphrates River. It says, but the 10 tribes decided not to stay in that land among many Gentiles. So they moved far east to a country where no human beings had ever lived before. There they hoped to keep their laws, which they had failed to keep in their own land. And it says, when they had to make difficult passage across the Euphrates, it says, Yahuwah, or God Most High, performed miracles for them and blocked the channels of the river until they had crossed over. It says their journey through the region, which is named Azarus, took a year and a half. So wherever they went, it took a year and a half. And this is, like I said, again, according to the Apocrypha. So according to the Apocrypha, it matches up perfectly with the, with what this messenger is saying. All right. And then just to kind of point out some interesting things that, they kind of sort of match up, but we're just calling it out, that actually in the Bible, there is a group of people called Pequot. So you know how we have the Pequot Indians over in the Americas, where you do have the Pequot Indians, found in the scriptures, and it's Strong's 86489. That's Strong's 86489. And this is the Pequot Indians, Pequot people. And this is interesting because these are people that's in Babylon, right? Babylon, and it's also in Assyria as well. So during the time, and it says the children of the 12 tribes were taken from the land and they were placed, over in, certain territories in Assyria, right? Over in Assyria and AKA Babylon. So it's interesting that in Assyria or Babylon, there is a place or people called the Pequods, right? Pequods. So just want to point that out. All right. And then let me do this, family. What I'm going to do, I'm going to go back to the book that we were reading, and I'm going to read quite a bit of it. So what I'm going to do is that I'm going to see if I can share my screen, and I'm just going to pull up the actual, let's see, share screen, pull window, StreamYard. All right, bear with me, fam. I'm just trying to see if it will allow me to share. Okay, hopefully you can see that. All right, so this is still that book that we were reading, and just to kind of show you, I'm going to scroll back up. All right, so it says, let's see. Let's pick back up where we were. It says, he told them that the people from which he was sent were the tribes of Israel. This is right here. It says, which in the days of Hosea, the king, were carried captives out of their own land by the king of Assyria, who transported them from Samaria into Assyria and the cities of the Medes, which is Iran. It says, but they being grieved for the transgressions which caused God to be angry with them, they took resolution to separate themselves from all idolatry, and so went from the heathen where they were placed by Salmanassar, and with resolution to live by themselves and observe the commandments of God, which in their own land they had not observed. And prosecuting this resolution after a long journey, and it says of a year and 6 months, they came to a country wholly destitute of inhabitants, where now they have increased into a great nation, and are to come from thence into their own land by the direction of God, and to show them that he was a true Israelite. It says, and to show them that he was a true Israelite, he had brought with him a scroll of the law of Moses, written according to their custom. And so this is the person, like, again, he's saying that he's come from the 10 lost tribes over in this land, and he's giving proof, and he's giving the history as to how they got there. And it says, the gentleman who told me this story as from the mouth of a Jew said that it brought to his mind fully by reason of the agreement of circumstances. It says, almost in all things, the story which is recorded in the second book of Ezra. And that's what I was just telling you about. And it says, which is called the Apocrypha, chapter 13, verse 40 till 50. And it says, which will be found a truth if that messenger came and made this narrative. It says, this was the first story. It says, and not long after, within a space of 5 or 6 months, a little before I came from the Low Country, I was told of a Jew who came from America to Amsterdam and brought to the Jews residing there news concerning the 10 tribes, that he had been with them. Let me read it again. It says that he had been with them upon the border of their land, and had conversed with some of them for a short space, and seen and heard remarkable things while staying with them, whereof then I could not learn the truth, just the true peculiars. It says, but I heard that narrative was made in writing, in which he had related, which before I went to Holland last, I had no time to seek after it. So basically, he's saying that this narrative of this particular encounter with the lost tribes of Israel over in America, he didn't necessarily have it at the time of this writing. Well, he didn't necessarily have it initially. But what you'll see is that he goes and works with these people and gets a copy of it, and then has Manasseh ben Israel sign off on it, just on his authenticity. So just want to point that out there. All right, so let's keep reading, family. It says, which before I went from Holland last, I had no time to seek after it. But since the reading of your book and some discourse, I have had with you about these matters. I have procured it from the Low Countries and received a copy thereof in French. It says, attested under Manasseh ben Israel, and that's what I was saying, that Manasseh ben Israel co-signed on the authenticity of this work. And it says, his hand, it says, that endoweth exactly in agreement with the original, as it was sent to me. It says, the translation thereof I have truly made without adding or taking away anything. It says, and because I was not satisfied in some things and desired to know how far the whole matter was believed among the Jews at Amsterdam, I wrote to Manasseh ben Israel, their chief rabbi, about it, and his answer had been given. So in other words, he had some questions about it, sent it to the rabbi up in Amsterdam, and then he's going to give you the response of the rabbi in Amsterdam as to the authenticity of the letters. It says in 2 letters, it says, telling me that by the occasion of the questions which I proposed unto him concerning this adjoined narrative of Mr. Antony Mysterios, he says, he to give me satisfaction had written instead of the letter a treatise, which he shortly would publish, and whereof I should receive so many copies as I should desire. It says in his letter dated November last 25th, it says that in his treatise, he handles the first he handles of the first inhabitants of America, which he believes were the 10 tribes. Moreover, that they were scattered also in other countries, which he names, in that they keep their true religion, as hoping to return again into the Holy Land in due time. And then it says in his second letter, dated the 23rd of December, he says more distinctly thus, I declare how that our Israelites were the first finders out of America. Again, this is a rabbi over in Amsterdam, and he's declaring how that our Israelites were the first founders of America. This is what he believes. And it says, not regarding the opinions of other men, which I thought good to refute in few words, only that I think that the 10 tribes live not only there, but also in other lands scattered everywhere. It says, these never did come back to the second temple, and they keep till this day still the Jewish religion, seeing all the prophecies which speak of their bringing back unto their native soil must be fulfilled. It says, so then at their appointed time, all the tribes shall meet from all parts of the world into 2 provinces, namely Assyria and Egypt. It says not, let me pull this down. It says not shall their kingdom be any more divided, but they shall have one prince, the Messiah of the son of David. Hallelujah. All right. Well, again, family, I just wanted to show you that, according to some of these old books, that they purport that they are the descendants of the tribes of Israel. And that is, when I say they, what I'm referring to is the Native Americans. And also showed you that at the beginning of this, this slide here, that the Pequots also believe that they too were of the tribes, the lost 10 tribes of Israel. So much so that the William Apes, a Pequot, and it says that he was a prominent Indian public intellectual, that he actually, was an activist and used that he used that, it says, on a number of occasions in a short talk printed here. He propounded the belief that the indigenous peoples of Americas were the 10 lost tribes. With sharp irony, he said that he had studied the issue and concluded that the theory was true. Apes turned the rhetoric of Christianity against whites to ask how, if Indians were the lost tribes, there was any possible reason for discrimination against them. Hallelujah. So again, he's just saying that if we're the 10 lost tribes, then why are you guys discriminating against us? And he actually has a point, and this is, again, this kind of goes back to some of the other previous videos that I pointed out. And that is that there was, whenever you talk about the history of the Jews and Christianity, and you bring up the times of the Inquisition, it was an open, open warfare on the Israelites by the Christian church. I mean, that was basically what the Inquisition was. Basically, they were persecuting Jews for following the laws, statutes, and commandments. All right. Well, with that bit of information, family, now what we want to do is just go back into the Thanksgiving story. And now that you know that, one of the prevailing thoughts during the time of, the Pequot massacre was that, you have a Pequot himself saying that they were descendant of the 10 lost tribes of Israel. Now when you look at that Pequot massacre, now look at it from the perspective of this massacre of Israelites. Hallelujah. Now look at it from the perspective of the massacre of Israelites. And with that, let's go back to the story of Thanksgiving.
Hidden away in the dense forests on America's eastern shores lies an Indian village tucked away from the conspicuous eyes of the pale-skinned colonizers who but recently arrived on these distant shores. A precursor to a much larger, more dangerous incursion, one that would later prove outright deadly for the peaceful native populations. After the English made landfall, the native Pequot Indians reached out to their arch rivals, the Narragansetts, in an attempt to dissuade them from joining forces with these foreign invaders. For they knew that eventually these invaders would take everything. As the following reference reads, in the meantime, the Pequots, especially in the winter before, sought to make peace with the Narragansetts and used very pernicious arguments to move them thereunto, as that English were strangers and began to overspread their country. And would deprive them thereof in time, if they were suffered to grow and increase. And if the Narragansetts did assist the English to subdue them, they did but make way for their own overthrow. For if they were rooted out, the English would soon take occasion to subjugate them. And so, unfortunately, the Narragansetts did not take heed to the warnings of the Pequots, for they joined themselves with the English in making war against the brown-skinned Pequot native brothers to massacre them. As the following reference reads, and it reads, the Pequots were retired into two strong forts, one of which was situated on the banks of the river Mystic, and the other about 8 miles further was the headquarters of Sassacus, their sachem, at whose name the Narragansetts trembled, saying he was all one a god, nobody could kill him. The council of war determined to attack the first fort they should come at, which the Indians took care should not be that of Sassacus. They made their approaches to it in the night, and sent an Indian to observe the posture of the enemy, who found them all in a profound sleep. The army came up to the fort about the break of day. Captain Mason, with his company, posted himself on the east, and Underhill on the west. But the Narragansetts, like cowards, retired to such a distance as to be only spectators of the action. When the army came within a rod of the fort, a dog barked and awakened the sentinel, who immediately ran away and cried, "Wanooks, Wanooks," i.e. English, English. The soldiers entered the fort at a passage, which was only blocked up with bushes about breast high. Captain Mason was the first man that leapt into it, and made good his ground till his men could pull the bushes away. Upon this followed a sharp engagement, in which several of the English were wounded, and many of the Indians killed. But the houses of the fort, being made of nothing but combustible mats, joined close to one another, the English set them on fire and retired, posting themselves at all the avenues to hinder the enemies making their escape. Now, family, just a quick side note, this is similar to the fall of Jerusalem, where Esau cut off the escape of Judah during the fall of Jerusalem. However, that's a story for another day. As we continue to read, and it reads, the fire by the advantage of the wind carried all before it. Many were burnt to death, which the Narragansetts from a distant rising ground, where they had posted themselves, beheld with infinite pleasure and satisfaction, dancing and whooping all the while, and insulting over their dying enemy. Some of the Pequots were shot as they were climbing over the palisades. They who had the courage to sally out at the gate in order to break through the enemy were either cut off by the English or the Narragansetts. And the next reference reads, and it reads, it was conceived they thus destroyed about 400 at this time. It was a fearful sight to see them frying in a fire, and streams of blood quenching the same, and horrible was the stench sent thereof. But victory seemed a sweet sacrifice, and they gave the prayers thereof to God, who had wrought so wonderfully for them, thus to enclose their enemies in their hands, and give them so speedily a victory over so proud and insulting enemy. Now, eventually, after helping the English destroy the Pequots, inevitably the English would also subjugate the Narragansetts, thus making the English the new masters of North America. And upon massacring the native population, the English set aside a day of thanksgiving to give thanks to their God for delivering to them such a great victory. As the following reference reads, and it reads, a day of thanksgiving kept in all the churches for our victory against the Pequots. And the next reference reads, and reads, there was a day of thanksgiving kept in all the churches for the victory obtained against the Pequots and for other mercies. The magistrates of Plymouth officially ordered such days to be kept as early as 1623, and in 1637 an ordinance was passed that it be in the power of the governor and assistants to command solemn days of humiliation and also for thanksgiving, as occasion should be offered. You see, family, these days of thanksgiving were later consolidated into a single day by Abraham Lincoln, during a time in which the so-called Negro was still a slave in America. And with that, family, now you know the origin of Thanksgiving Day. Shalom.